to Career Uprising. I'm your host and professional career coach, Lorraine Rise. Join me as I guide you through an amazing journey of self-discovery and empowerment. If you are looking for work, changing careers, or stuck in a toxic job, then this is the show for you. I offer both practical and spiritual guidance to help you up-level and advance your career. Let's start the uprising. Hey everyone, you are listening to episode 73, When to Quit Your Job with Dan Lawner. Hey everyone, before we get started, take a quick moment for me now and hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts. I would really appreciate it. And that way you will never miss a show of Career Uprising. And it's a great way to pay it forward. And you can also leave a review. Those are greatly, greatly appreciated. So, you guys, I have a really good show today. I have a client success story. I love doing these. I love bringing on my past clients to let them share their story and inspire you, because I think that for you as the listener, there is really nothing more inspiring and nothing that shows you proof of what is possible more than hearing it from a real client, a real success story. So that's what we have today. And so I'm really excited. In a moment, I'm going to bring on Dan Lawner. And just to give you a little bit of background, Dan came to me exactly a year ago, really. It was January of 2019, and he signed up for my Career Jumpstart program. And after 6 years at his company, he felt no longer aligned with where he was, and he knew that it was time to move on. He was ready for a new challenge, but he didn't have a job lined up right away. So what Dan ended up doing is what I know a lot of other people out there have thought about doing, which is quitting their job. So what happened was Dan eventually left his position without another one lined up. He felt strongly that that was the right thing to do. And he's going to share his story today. He's going to share the journey and the outcome and what he learned along the way. And it was not an easy road, as you're going to hear, but I want him to share his story. And this has been several months in the making. Him and I have been talking about bringing him on the show for a while. I've always known that he was really a standout client, honestly, one that I continued a good connection with and a good conversation with. And so I'm really happy that this show is coming to fruition now. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you, Lorraine. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we've been talking about doing this for a while and the time is right now. So I'm going to give you the spotlight in a minute. I'm so happy that you agreed to do this. And you guys, this is a busy time for Dan. He's got a newborn and a new job and a lot of things going on. So I think it's great that you took some time out to inspire other people and share your story. So why don't we start out, Dan, just tell listeners a little bit about what line of work you're in. What is your background, your skill set, and what is it that you do?
Yes. So I work broadly in the international development space. So working to help people in developing countries have better and lead healthier and better lives. And then more specifically, I am a learning professional. And so when you had mentioned in your fantastic intro, I had worked for a global health organization, largely in the program side of the business. So being the direct connection between our colleagues who work in the countries that we were working in, that connector between those country programs and the headquarters. And so I was doing direct program support within that organization, and decided that I wanted to make a change, largely because a lot of that job had required me to travel a lot internationally. And as I was looking to start a family, put down roots in this area, that was becoming challenging looking forward. And so I moved into the learning and talent space. And that was a lot of the work that I had been doing all along the way, training people both in headquarters and in the field, and working to help colleagues grow and be better, and facilitating and designing workshops. All of those kind of things align me well with the learning field. And so that's a bit of who I am: international development and learning.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I've worked with a lot of other folks in similar space within nonprofits and international development. So there probably will be some people out there listening who have that type of background or that line of work. It's definitely one that I have come across before with clients. Yeah. So when you were thinking about making this change and looking for another job, what was it that prompted you to want to reach out for some help and get some coaching? How did you arrive at that decision?
So you're right. I had to think back that it's funny to think that it was a year ago. And so I even looked back at some of our emails and was trying to remember exactly when we had gotten back in touch. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I had become really certain that I loved being a learning professional. I loved thinking about helping people within the organization that I was working grow and be better tomorrow than they were today. And also the fact that the work of the organization I believed in, I knew it was important to feel like I was in a place where I could just bring the things that I was good at to help the organization be better. Like, I knew that I was in a line of work that was right for me. And at the same time, this situation that I was in, it didn't feel like that was it wasn't the situation where I was going to really grow well. So I was in within a human resources department. And the focus wasn't learning. The focus, so there was a lot going on within the department. There had been a lot of change within that department. I'll put it out there, frankly, struggling with a new supervisor who I'd begun to work with. Mm-hmm. And the grass just started looking a lot greener on the other side. And a month before I reached out, I had gone to a conference to connect with other leaders in the learning space, and it just became really clear, like, I want to be a learning professional and I can't stay in this role forever. This is not going to allow me to grow in the way that I want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so ultimately, after working with you for a little while, I remember you emailed me and let me know that you made the decision to go ahead and leave your job and take some time off, even though you didn't have a job lined up yet. And a lot of people out there, and I know this for a fact because I hear people say this to me a lot, is, can you quit? Can I quit my job? Or they think that they just can't, that's, you're not supposed to do that. It's too risky, but people do it. And you're not the only person. I've worked with other folks who have taken an intentional sabbatical or whatever it may be, and then return to the workforce. So, but that's a decision that I'm sure you didn't take lightly, and that does come with an element of risk and struggle. So how did you know that the time was right to do that? And how did you arrive at that decision and kind of trust that?
Yeah, so looking back and really in thinking about this, me coming on your show, remembering that decision process, I look back and I was like, that was pretty impulsive for me to just walk in. And I had walked into a weekly check-in with my boss at the time and just said, I'm going to be leaving this organization. And we talked about the notice that I would give. And so looking back over these months, it sort of felt like that was something pretty impulsive and a bit rash to do. But as I've been reflecting more recently, I recall very clearly, I had put months before a date in my calendar. It was, I think, 3 months before that
Mm-hmm.
I had put a date in my calendar that said, this is when I would like to put in notice. And during that time, we had been working together. I had been, you helped me overhaul my resume in a way that was really getting a lot of traction by just applying cold in ways that
Mm-hmm.
I was not expecting. I was landing interviews, and I also felt like I had really good clarity in terms of what I wanted. So I wasn't jumping out and saying, you know, screw it, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. And had no
Right.
plan or no sense of what
Right.
was next. And it wasn't also that I was needing to step back and saying, what do I want to do with my life? So knowing that I had that clarity, knowing that even if some of the roles I was applying for were going to be a stretch, that I was in the ballpark. And so I felt like I was taking a risk, but it was one that I had sat with for a little bit. It was one that I felt was manageable. I had lots of conversations with my wife about this possibility, and we had talked it out a lot over that time. And so at that time, it still felt like taking a jump, but in really looking back on it, it was something that was pretty thought out over months, pretty planned, and it felt like that risk was something that I had a handle on. I could kind of understand it.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. You said you had set months ahead of time. You had set a desired end date for your position on your calendar, and then are you saying that that worked out to be pretty close? That's about when you left, or how did that turn out?
I almost got to that date, but I almost
Yeah.
reached it. I knew it was looming, but I got
But that's
got a
very
little,
synchronistic. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Almost like you kind of set an intention
yeah,
and it
exactly,
came true. It actually came
yeah,
true a little bit sooner,
a little bit
which,
sooner. There you
maybe is
go.
even better, right? Sometimes it's like a little nudge from the universe, but it's definitely kind of a cooperative process. You have to take a step and be willing to go first. And then I think the universe kind of supports you and aligns some things. And so it sounds like it was very synchronistic and that you had a clear intention of, this is what I want and this is when I would like it by. And then of course you followed that up with action a lot
There you
and
go.
applying. Absolutely. You have to do
Yeah.
that. So did you have worries when you did this about maybe this could backfire in some way, or maybe the search will take longer than I think, or maybe people won't want to hire me with a gap on my resume? A lot of people, I think that's what stops them too from doing this if they want to. And I'm just curious, did those questions cross your mind, and how did you kind of mitigate those concerns?
Yes. Yes, I had all of these worries. Um, and I think for me, how I would categorize what I was worried about. I mean, part of it was about optics, sort of how I would look as a candidate who was not employed. And I had and have a mentor who I got to know over the last couple of years, who kind of in the learning and organizational development and talent space, who we developed a really good relationship, and he was always and is always super frank with me, and he said, be careful, people might look at you differently when you don't have a title attached to your name.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was something that was on my mind. Part was just I had assumptions about how I was coming into the job market, and the marketability of my skills, and kind of how I looked as a candidate. And I knew that maybe those assumptions were wrong. And so maybe I knew I was getting interviews, but who knows whether this could be a search that could go on for longer than I wanted. And I knew that the longer it went on, that time could create a gap in my resume that I would have to start further needing to justify in
Mm-hmm.
interviews. Um, and then also was part of it just in terms of knowing myself and knowing about the amount of structure that I need in my life. And so I was kind of worried about how much I would be sort of a solid, disciplined, full-time job seeker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
you definitely put a lot of thought and intention into this, and I know you, and I know that that's the kind of the way that you would approach it, right? Is very analytical and thinking about the pros and the cons, and that's really something you have to do when you make a decision like this. You can't take it lightly, but it's true that people take time off. It's something that people need to do sometimes. But for you, it actually ended up not being that long, right? How long did you have off in between positions?
I left my previous full-time position around Memorial Day
Mm-hmm.
2019, and then I landed some consulting work, which ended up being fantastic. It was within the learning space and ended up being a really great assignment. And that started mid-September, and then wrapped that up by Christmas, and then just started this new position at the start of February. So all in all, I was not working for about 3, 4 months.
And that is not long. That is quick. That is not a long time at all. So you obviously did something right in that time period. So that's a good thing. Absolutely. So I have a question that I kind of a little signature question that I ask all of my clients who come on the show, and I think you will appreciate this. As certainly being a learning and development kind of person
Yeah.
yourself, but what did you learn about yourself during this process? Because I feel like a job search and a career change teaches us things about ourselves. So, what did you learn about yourself during this whole process?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that was really, really important, that as soon as I put in notice for my previous job, I was talking to my dad on the phone and I told him, I I was like, I did this and now I'm feeling really afraid, like kind of freaked out about the amount of uncertainty
Uh
that
huh.
lays ahead. And what he said, which really not only stuck with me during this period where I wasn't working, but really has stuck with me and has helped kind of, yeah, I mean, it has helped me learn about myself. He said that we tend to create a lot of structure and routine for ourselves, whether it's in a job or whether it's other routine and structure that we create for ourselves. And that gives us the illusion that we know what's going to happen next and that we're in control. And that's all. It's just an illusion, and we never know what's going to
I
happen
love
next. And so that was
Yes.
really, really helpful. In I think that I took for granted a lot of the security, I think, in the having a full-time position, but also being with an organization for a lot of time in which you're known, you know what's going on. It's there's a lot that you're needing to think about, but there's a lot that you're not, and I think that I took that for granted. And being in this new role, I think there's an aspect of coming to work each day. There's an excitement in it, and there's also a sense that it's fragile. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that all in all throughout this process, that's probably the number one thing I've learned, is that, yeah, the having all of the structure and all of the uh, things about a position that kind of boost you up, and all of that's sort of fragile, and it's really a lot better to just take it one day at a time and do the next right thing, and just do your best each day.
I love that. And so I want to, you jogged my memory about something else, and I want to make a note here to my listeners and those of you who have listened to this show for a while. So several months ago, episode 59, I did another show called Possibility versus Certainty. And I created that show because of something. He's laughing because he knows I'm talking about him.
Yeah.
I created that show solely from what you said, Dan. So to my listeners, Dan is that client that I made that show around, because you truly inspired me when you emailed me to say, I believe you said, in making this transition and walking away from your position, that you traded a whole lot of certainty for a whole lot of possibility. And I just thought was so eloquently said and so inspirational. And I'm a sucker for a good quote. So I emailed Dan back and I said, I am going to steal that and make a show out of it. And I did. So to everyone listening, go check out episode 59, because Dan inspired that show as well, that one and this one. So that's really, really cool. So I'm so glad that you're here to actually do a show and introduce yourself to listeners, because you've already influenced this show months and months ago. So wonderful.
Well, you're welcome.
Oh, good. We made 2 shows out of you, Dan.
There you go.
So I want to ask you one more question here. What advice do you have for somebody who might be facing a similar decision? Maybe there's somebody who is, they could be in a toxic job, or they could just be burnt out, or whatever. They feel like they want to go, but they don't have the courage maybe to just go ahead and walk away. What would you say to them? No pressure.
No, it's an important question, and I'll just tell you, I'm personally, I'm cautious with advice, in giving really general advice, because it's easy to give, and yet each of your listeners is gonna have their own unique situations, and have situations that are so different and feel so real and vivid. And I don't know each of those. So giving sort of general advice, there's something about it which feels easy and sort of cheap for me to give, but I'll give it a shot.
Yeah. We like free advice. That's cool.
Yeah, no, exactly. So what I'll say is, I think when there's this question of whether I should leave a job or not leave a job, I think that can become an all-consuming question, and it can become really, really stressful and anxiety producing. I know that during that period where I'd put that date on my calendar, had that question of whether I would leave and when, that question got to be really big. And I found the most helpful things that I was doing during that period was just doing the work of figuring out what my story is and how to tell my story as a job seeker. About I was trying to work on my voice, and meaning posting on LinkedIn about things that I was reflecting on within the learning field, where I felt like I had something relevant to add and something relevant to say. I was connecting with folks, putting myself out there and connecting with folks in my field or adjacent to my field who I wanted to know, and I thought would be great to just know and have a connection with. And during those times where I was just doing the work and not obsessing about whether I should leave my job or should not leave my job, that I was moving in the right direction, but it wasn't this kind of big question that was producing a lot of anxiety. It was just moving me in a helpful direction, and that momentum continued after I left, and that was work that I had done in the months before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've said it before on this show. I think that there are times when it is necessary for people to let go of a situation they're in before they can even see the next step. sometimes I think that happens because I know I have worked with clients who are in really demanding or kind of toxic jobs. And you get so wrapped up in that sometimes, and you get so consumed by it, you don't have any time or mental or emotional space to really see and feel what could be next for you. And I know I have been there as well. So I've definitely been in that situation myself too, where, through a layoff or something, I'm actually grateful for separating first from where I am so that I can even see the next step. Does that make sense? I don't know if you can relate to that at all, but I feel like there are times, when the letting go has to come first before you can step into something else or sense what that other thing will be. And so, but that's a really scary place to be for people, especially when we're talking about your income and your livelihood and things like that. But there are, we can't take that lightly, but there are clients where I'm like, it's your self-esteem or a paycheck. Surely there's another way we can get you a paycheck, right? Like sometimes, and so there are situations, I'm just kind of speaking to the listeners, where you may have to detach from whatever isn't working before you will even find what is. And it's scary, but it's necessary and can be done. So, so sometimes it works that way. At least that's what I have found in my career. But I thank you so much, Stan. Is there anything else you want to share or any other message for listeners or, and tell us how it worked out? Are you liking your new job, I assume?
I'm 3 weeks in and I just walked into the house this evening and said to my wife, I really like my new job.
Oh,
yeah,
yay.
I do. I really do. It is really it's a job with mandate, which is really important to me. It's space to operate and space to lead and develop and realize a vision. I'm working for a boss who I've known for some time, who I think is brilliant, and I have a lot to learn from. And I like my colleagues. It's a good situation. I feel really good.
Wonderful. I'm so happy for you. And I'm happy for all the positive changes that are happening in your life right now, your growing family, your new job, and everything. So you've been a wonderful client to work with, and certainly an excellent guest on this show. So thank you so much, Dan, for coming and sharing your story. So there you have it, my listeners. I hope you were inspired by this. And if you also want to be a success story, I'd love to help you get there. You can take the first step and join my email community. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn or go to my website, careeruprising.com. And I'm always looking for questions that you want me to answer for you on air or a topic that you might want to propose. So you can also email me at Lorraine@careeruprising.com. But that is it for this episode. Thank you, Dan, and everyone. Have a beautiful day. That's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard today, please consider giving the show a positive review on iTunes. It would mean a lot to me, and it would help to spread the word so that others can learn about the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and I can't wait to connect with you again next time on Career Uprising.
This show was brought to you by inflowradio.com, the best curated talk radio network for personal development, wellness, spirituality, and conscious business.